You learn combat by doing combat. Anyone that is not frightened when they go into combat is not fully aware of what combat is all about.
Brown is one lucky man. Flying American bombers in World War II, he could have been another casualty for the 379th Bomb Group.
It's a very beautiful memorial. Quite proud to have been a part of it.
Charlie's life was spared by an enemy. He was Franz Stigler, once an ace flyer, now at 82, mostly grounded.
Once in a while I take the controls on it.
Do you miss it?
Very much so.
In the war, Stigler was on the other side, but in 1953 he left Germany and settled in British Columbia.
This looks like Africa.
That is Africa.
Haya Stigler's home is a monument of sorts to her late husband's flying accomplishments.
I mean, Franz flying was his biggest love.
Yeah.
Whenever he could, he flew. It was his life, his first love.
Father
that is
and mother?
his father, mother, and...
Franz Stigler's life ended in British Columbia, but he was born in the mountains of Bavaria. His father, a World War I pilot. As a young man, Franz and his brother August learned to fly in gliders they built themselves. As they grew up, the Germany they knew was changing rapidly. Military service was not an option. Franz, however, chose to train pilots. And while his brother became a fighting ace, soon his fate would be sealed.
This was right when his brother had been killed.
He was allowed to go home.
The death of his brother, shot down by the enemy, affected Franz Stigler deeply.
Franz never had intentions of shooting down other planes, so being a hot shot, a hero to the nation, that was never part of his goal.
Author Adam Makos knows Franz Stigler's story intimately, spent years researching it for his book, A Higher Call. He says the death of Stigler's brother was a pivotal moment in his life.
At that moment, Franz changed as a person because the war suddenly became very personal. He fell victim to that human emotion, the want for revenge.
Start auf einem Feldflugplatz in Afrika.
The newly minted fighter pilot found himself in Africa under the watchful eye of squadron leader Gustav Rodel. Rodel had a strict code of conduct, especially when it came to the enemy. He told Stigler, "If I ever catch you shooting at a man in a parachute, a downed fighter, I will shoot you down myself." Makos says Rodel added something else.
Franz, it's not for your enemy that you do this. You do this for yourself, for your soul, so that one day, if, God willing, you survive this war, you can live with yourself.
A skilled fighter after Africa, Stigler served in Sicily and Europe, and while shot down several times, he always survived and was on the verge of achieving the coveted Knight's Cross. Shooting down one more enemy bomber would do it.
The remarkable story began 5 days before Christmas in 1943. Franz Stigler was a veteran fighter pilot and Charlie Brown on his first mission as commander of a B-17 bomber.
You were a rookie pilot.
Rookie beyond belief.
He even lied about his age. He was 21, but said he was 25 just to impress his crew. Their B-17 was named Ye Old Pub, part of a 500 bomber formation headed for an airplane factory in Bremen, Germany. They anticipated a dogfight. 250 of Germany's best flak gunners and maybe 500 German fighters.
Once you start on that bomb run, you never divert, you never do anything.
Straight as an arrow.
Just straight to give the lead aircraft time to set up. And that's when the flak is at its most severe.
Ye Old Pub got hit, her nose blown away. She lost 2 engines, 8 guns, and most of the communications. Still, Charlie and his crew got the bombs off.
And I could not stay in formation even without the bombs. And so the formation just pulled off and left us.
Left by yourself, orphaned.
That's when the Germans showed up.
This time, it was the Luftwaffe's turn to take a bite out of Ye Old Pub.
I do remember being inverted and looking up at the ground, and the next thing I know, I'm pulling up over trees.
That day in the same battle, Franz Stigler was doing damage in his Messerschmitt 109.
I shot 2 down in the same day, and then I landed to refuel and rearm.
From the ground, he spotted Charlie Brown's crippled bomber.
So I went after him, looked at the flying wreck and sized him up and figured out how to finish it off.
My guns were frozen up, and I had my barrels pointed at him, and he knew they couldn't do anything because they weren't shooting. He kept closing, I couldn't shoot.
So I'm sitting in the cockpit alone, and I look out, and there's the world's worst nightmare sitting on my right wing. I closed my eyes, and I opened them again, and he was still alive. It was a feeling of absolute helplessness, and, you know, you were totally subject to his whim.
Do you remember Charlie's face?
Yeah, I remember his face.
What did you see in that face?
Horror.
Every foot of the bomber had a hole. He looks down the tail, and there he sees the tail gunner. He sees the gunner is slumped over them. His head is practically missing, and the blood is actually streaming down the barrels of the gun.
Shot full of holes, guns frozen up, and a badly wounded crew.
I had one that couldn't walk, one that couldn't use his hands, and one with the leg blown off, and one dead.
In that moment, depicted here by artist John D. Shaw, Franz Stigler, seeing the big bomber is crippled, commits an act some would call treason, punishable by death. After looking his enemies in the eyes, he decides to save them.
And he says, this bomber with these 9 or 10 men aboard is the same thing as a man in a parachute. And he remembered that lesson from the desert. But when he saw the wounded men on that bomber, saw their eyes, suddenly he saw his brother's eyes. He saw his brother's face. He saw his brother's last moment. And he realized that he was about to kill men just like someone had killed his brother in a way.
And he couldn't do it.
And he couldn't do it.
And I saw him lying in there, bleeding profusely, so I couldn't shoot.
You couldn't?
No. If I wouldn't have seen him, it was different. If I wouldn't have seen a person at all, you know, I would have shot.
They're the enemy.
When you shoot at the airplane, you don't think of people in there. You see the airplane, nothing else. The plane, that bombs your cities or your factories or whatever. But in this case, as I saw this tail gunner, just couldn't do it.
Instead, he tried to get the B-17 to surrender over Germany, but no response. So he escorted the bomber out over the North Sea and pointed towards Sweden a half-hour away. But Charlie Brown had other ideas.
I said, I'm going to try to make England. Well, just about that time, he gave a wave salute and left.
And the last thing he did, waved to us just like that. Peeled off to the right and went down.
What were you saying with the wave?
I say, I hope you make it home. That's what my wave was about.
Upon landing, Charlie Brown tells his incredible story, but not for long.
And the intelligence officer said, wow, this is incredible. I'm going to run this up the flagpole. And sure enough, the same intelligence officer comes back an hour later with a different look on his face. He's not happy. He says, Charlie, you can't tell anyone what happened. The brass is putting a lid on this thing.
No medals, no recognition.
Exactly. They didn't want word of this to get out.
Brown would survive 26 more missions, finally getting to celebrate the end without ever speaking another word about the German fighter pilot who saved his crew. Franz, too, would survive the war, only to emigrate to Canada looking for work.
No, that is from the Queen Charlotte's mainly.
Marrying Haya, becoming a proud Canadian citizen, initially working in the logging camps where he was accepted as an equal.
That's why he went to Canada. And Canada, he had no problem. He always loved Canada. He always loved Canada.
But he never forgot that American bomber crew.
He says, you know, I always wonder, because he couldn't talk about it before. And he says, I wonder what happened to that plane, whether they made it back to England. He always wondered.
Decades passed until one day Franz picked up a German military newsletter only to find a B-17 pilot named Charlie Brown was trying to find him. They exchanged letters, And on June 21st, 1990, in Seattle, Washington, 57 years after that fateful day, the two former combatants met.
Could you sort of tell us what your feelings were when you two met today?
It's almost impossible to describe. We had spent several hours on the phone, so I felt that we had something in common. First, a love of air and a love of aviation. It was like meeting a family member, a brother that you haven't seen for 40 years. That's about as close as I can come.
Franz, what were your feelings when you met again for the first time?
I was so happy as we met that I dropped him on top of him. Was it easy?
What do you owe Franz Stigler?
My life.
That's pretty simple.
Sure is.
The fact that he risked his life, really, in many ways, and I wrote him in the letter, I said, if you made a habit of feeling sorry for bomber crews and flag up alongside them, I am sure that you were shot down many times. But it was not only the, if you will, I use the term audacity, that he came up to us and then recognizing the threat. If someone had seen him and reported him, it could have been a death sentence, a double. So he had the double impact of the fact that we might do something stupid, or his own government, as a consequence, might do something.
30,000 Americans died in B-17s during World War II. From Charlie Brown's plane, at least 3 men survived, and they have 25 descendants.
Kimberly Ansberger, Michael Ansberger, Michelle Warner.
Franz Stigler had never seen their pictures or heard their names.
Jessica Blackford, Zachary Blackford, Richard Papalo, Scott Pickard.
25 people who came into being and live today, all because Franz Stigler did not pull the trigger.
Nicholas Blackford. No, it's the other side of fate, which we have no control about.
Now barely a year goes by without a reunion. This year it's in Savannah, Georgia, at the newly opened 8th Air Force Museum. It stirs the memories.
Well, what was your favorite tail gunner?
Did you get in trouble with some tail gunners, Franz?
Quite often.
Oh.
This one is for my tail gun.
Tail gun.
Now,
I had one in the lake too for my tail gun.
Franz, where's your plane?
That one up there, that was my airplane. I lost 17 of them.
Now, did you guys fear the Messerschmitt?
We respected him very
The
much.
fact that Franz shot down colleagues, friends,
That was his job.
family, that doesn't bother you?
No, that was his job. That day, I killed a man who had 70 victories in the Soviet Union. He had a pregnant wife that arrived on the base while he's airborne that day. These things you put in the back and you lock.
Did he ask you why you didn't shoot him down?
No, he didn't. Not then, no. Sometimes I wonder why I didn't.
He's become a pain in the neck, has he?
Yeah, really.
There's no plane like the 17.
Put any vets together and the stories fly. But this fall at the reunion of Charlie's 379th Bomb Group, one war tale stood out.
Charlie, would you like to come up here and escort Franz Stigler to the microphone here?
This certificate has been presented to L. Franz Stigler in appreciation of his compassion and chivalrous action. Franz, it sort of leaves me wordless, almost. It could not happen to a nicer gentleman.
Franz Stigler never got his Knight's Cross, but as he often said, he got something much better. And Peter, while researching the book, author Adam Makos found a private note that Franz Stigler had written to Charlie Brown. In part it reads, "In 1940, I lost my only brother. Just before Christmas, I had the chance to save a B-17 from her destruction. The pilot Charlie Brown is for me as precious as my brother was. Thanks, Charlie." Quite the story.